Let's now talk about Nairobi. So Nairobi is this shamba la mawe that has 5 million residents. Can you imagine? 5 million people doing 1, 2, 3 things. Kuna watu wanaibia wengine, kuna watu wanauzia wengine. It's just all things are happening. Of course, when you have so many people concentrated within such a small area, and there are all these buildings and developments coming up, there is always likely to be one disaster or another. All right? Some of these disasters are inevitable. You are going to have fire emergencies. You are going to have buildings collapsing. And we've seen that in Nairobi. It rains. Clogged drainages. And then therefore flooding. And then things just happen left, right, and center. There's a department in the county government of Nairobi that is in charge of disaster management and coordination. That department has a PS. In county parlance, we call it chief officer. So the chief officer for disaster management and coordination in Nairobi City County Government is Bramwell Simiyu. He's our guest this morning. We want to talk about what challenges they face in disaster response and management and what the future should look like. Bramwell, good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
Karibu sana to the hot seat of the situation room.
Asante sana.
City is not in. He left us with greetings.
All right.
Amesema tukusalimia sana.
Shukran.
And we welcome you
Asante.
with the day's proverb. The proverbs for this week are from the Republic of the Gambia.
Yes.
And today's proverb, listen to it and give us your interpretation. If you stir up water in the pond, you will bring up the pond. If you stir up water in the pond, you will bring up the pond.
Yeah.
What do you think they're saying, the Gambians?
Well, I can only imagine that what they're referring to is stirring up sleeping dogs. That which has been left to settle at the bottom of the pond and is calm and sedate. If you get an opportunity to do that, then you will certainly cause those sediments to come to the fore. So in society, if you assume that this community is all quiet and calm and nothing is wrong, and you end up poking them in the eye, chances are that they'll be able to stand up and you'll see a side of them that you thought was long buried. Yeah. My own interpretation.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Does it remind you of the late John Mishoke? If you rattle a snake,
yes,
be prepared to be bitten by it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Chokoze nyoka lilala.
Yes. Okay.
Asante.
Disaster management in Nairobi.
Yes.
I mean, we see building collapse. That's one issue. Fire, industrial area. That's another issue. Fire, Gikomba. It's an issue. Fire, toy market. It's an issue.
Yes.
Floods. So people swept away by floods affected from Mukuru to Mathare to Runda to Kilimani. All these are disaster upon disaster upon disaster.
Yes.
Do you get to sleep, Brahma?
Well, let's just say that the past 1 year since I assumed office, 1.5 years, has been a steep learning curve. One that has been challenging, but I think one that has also been rewarding in the sense that I've come to appreciate that there are men and women in this town, mostly the firefighters and the disaster management workers and the emergency response workers, who give their lives and safety, put their lives and safety on the line to ensure that Nairobians are safe and their properties secure. In a way, I walked into an ecosystem that has long experience. If you're looking at disaster management or emergency response in Nairobi County, we have a very long history, perhaps even longer than this country. The first fire station was set up in 1907 around Tomboya, on land donated by a gentleman known as Desai. And the first firefighter was known as Braidwood. What I didn't know was that actually the building opposite the Tomboya fire station, which is known as Braidwood House, was actually built in honor of the first chief fire officer who died in the line of duty. Just giving you an indication that we have more than 100 years plus experience in firefighting. For a long time, we only had that station at Tomboya. We then had the second one at Enterprise Road in 1956. We had other stations coming up over the past 20 years. We now have a total of 6. But we have a courageous bunch of ladies and gentlemen who serve in the firefighting department in Nairobi County, who do so much, but so little is actually celebrated. And for me, I'd like to start at the onset by just recognizing these guys who don't sleep. They respond to, like you said, fires. On average, you do about 3 or 4 fires every day. They respond to
Every day there are
Every
3 or
day.
4
Three
fires.
every day,
in
3 to
Nairobi
4 fires.
County?
Yes, mostly in the low-income settlements. These are people that work tirelessly, running towards danger when everybody else is running away from it. So the past 1 year has actually allowed me to live in the world and become part of that world. So I have toughened up. I've been able to be on scenes of incidents for up to 38 hours. The Muradi fire we had in Embakasi. I could see what these brave firefighters, the Red Cross workers, the military do on a day-to-day basis. Something that many members of the public might not really understand. So in a way, I want to sort of just appreciate the direction that we've taken as a county under the leadership of His Excellency Governor Sakaja, who has given us the latitude really to try and evolve disaster response. Just to also give you a bit of perspective, for the longest time, fire and rescue services was a unit in the engineering department up to around 2013, when it was taken to the security services sector as a unit. It's only in 2018 that the decision was made to establish a fully fledged disaster management sector, recognizing and appreciating that when it comes to managing disasters, it's not about being reactive. We need to focus more on the mitigation, the prevention,
Right.
but also address the aspect of recovery and rehabilitation.
So how is it structured? How is
Yes.
disaster management
Yes.
structured in county?
Yeah, so when I took over, we only had the fire and rescue department, which, as I mentioned, was really more of a reactive, responsive unit, dealing with incidents after the act. But we now have a fully fledged department with 3 directorates. We have the disaster risk reduction directorate that is headed by a director, has a deputy director and assistant directors, and its focus really is on prevention, mitigation. So working with the communities to build resilience, creating awareness, putting in place early warning systems. We have very robust programs, working with the schools, working with communities, just to put in place sort of strategies that can help us avert these disasters.
Can you give us an example of that?
Well, we have an ongoing program in primary schools where we are educating the members of the public and the students on, basic survival skills, first aid skills, just looking at how schools are set up, the safety routes and so on and so forth. We're also working with the communities in the low-income settlements to set up what you call community response teams as a first line of defense, understanding and appreciating that really it's the community that ought to be the first in line before any other agency comes on board. So the disaster risk reduction has been at the forefront of that. We're also working on putting in place policies and programs, appreciating that the legal and regulatory framework is actually not quite optimal for us to be able to manage disasters. So we have that unit championing research and coming up with a draft legislation that would help enhance our efficiency as a sector to be able to deal with the disasters. So that is the disaster risk reduction. We have then the fire and rescue services, which really is the response unit. This is a paramilitary disciplined force that then responds to disasters. Its measure really being speed and efficiency of response. These are the kanjos that, the firefighters that you typically see with the red trucks, running on to the scenes, rescuing, responding to incidents, putting out fires, responding to water incidents, and so on and so forth. So that's the second directorate. Then the third one, which we saw fit and with the support of His Excellency the Governor, was to set up what you call the Training Innovations Department, which sort of anchors the Nairobi Disaster Management Training Academy. And for us, this is important because we are looking at building the capacity of our firefighters and disaster management officers to be able to respond effectively and efficiently. And for me, this is important because for a long time, we've not had what I'd call identifiable center where you can train firefighters or disaster management workers from a skill perspective. Forget about the disaster management courses we do at the universities, but a place you can go to and undergo professional firefighting, fire rescue, fire investigation skills.
So where have they been training?
That is part of the gap that we've had. Most of the if you look at the architecture of our firefighting department, we have two cohorts. We have those that were trained on the job, the class of 87, class of 90, which is an aging force. Most of these have been trained abroad. So they went to Israel, to the UK, Japan, the US, and they're highly skilled. So for a long time, we had some sort of mentorship program where we started with the British, trained the first generation of African firefighters, and it's been more of passing on the knowledge. We've had some training program which was not certified at Kangundo Road, where we have the training school. We know that Kiambu County also has a smaller training school that has been offering this course. But these have been courses that are offered after recruitment. And I think in the course of this discussion, perhaps I'll touch on one of the issues that actually caused a bit of ruckus in terms of the qualification of what is a firefighter. So our goal is actually to set up Kangundo Road as a center of excellence where we can be able to offer professional firefighting courses that is certified by NITA, certified by DOSH, and all other professional agencies. Of course, anchoring and leveraging on international partnerships with other, certified international bodies, so that we can have a firefighter walking out after a 6-month training course with certification that is recognized globally. At the moment, that is one of the gaps that we have in the market. So that is the structure that we have at the moment. Just to, again, just to sort of clarify that we have a director in charge of the disaster risk reduction. We have a director in charge of fire and rescue services, and we have a director for the training, innovation, and development sector, which really is what anchors the center of excellence or the training school.
What would you say are some of the challenges that are being faced by the county right now in terms of then working through disasters when they happen? Because we've had a series of them, have we not?
Yes.
Most recently, the floods, and dealing with a number of things, trying to get people to higher ground, trying to defend for their needs. So what have you seen over, let's say, the last year that would pose as a challenge that from a challenge to managing disasters that happen in the city?
Okay, I think we can look at this from different perspectives, but I think the most glaring one is the institutional capacity. Just having the adequate resources in terms of manpower, in terms of tools and equipment, in terms of financial resources to be able to respond adequately. As you correctly observed at the onset, Eric, Nairobi is not just any other county. This is the face of Kenya. This is an international center. So you carry the aspirations of not just the citizens of Nairobi, but the entire country. It is the seat of government. So in terms of risk management or the risk profile, a lot rides on our ability to be able to respond to all these different man-made and natural disasters that we have. So having a world-class fire and rescue or disaster management sector is central to a lot of other socioeconomic aspirations for this country. So our biggest challenge has been the capacity. At the moment, we have about 400 firefighters. Global best practices prescribe one firefighter for every 2,000 citizens. With our population of about 5 to 6 million residents, we are looking at having a force of about 2 to 3,000 firefighters. So we have a serious deficit in terms of capacity. The second bit that I'd consider to be a challenge, of course, is just the issue of public awareness. A lot of the challenges we faced during the floods, you could see, were a result of behavior, human behavior, a bit of impunity. People building on riparian lands, people building on top of drainage systems. We have, structures that have been constructed without due regard to, best practices. And they're basically time bombs. So we recognize that the level of awareness amongst the members of the public required a lot of upgrading, and we've done. That's why we set up the disaster risk reduction unit, really to be a proactive entity that engages and cooperates and collaborates with the members of the public to sort of get them to understand that what they do has a direct implication on their safety and security. So that bit has been a challenge. The third, I think, glaring challenge we've had is just the lack of a proper legal and regulatory framework. For a long time, we've not had a clear, acts of parliament or laws and regulations that govern disaster management in the county, and in the county and in the country. And this has a direct implication on three elements. One is the leadership of disaster management. Who takes charge whenever incidents happen, right?
It's the military man that
exactly. I think the trend has been many times whenever there's a disaster, everybody sort of automatically looks at the Red Cross. But essentially, it should be the duty and responsibility of the government to offer safety and security. So when you come to the government, there are many entities. We have the military, we have the police, we have NOS, we have ourselves, we have the Red Cross, we have the St. John's. So in terms of prescribing leadership of who takes charge whenever there's a disaster, that becomes an issue, or even an emergency, because
there's no law that defines this.
For a long time, it's not been there, but progress has been made. We now had the national government, Parliament passing the National Disaster Management Authority bill. I think a couple of months ago. That, I think, is a step in the right direction. The second bit under the legal and regulatory framework that needs to be clarified in terms of streamlining the sector is the issue of control and communication. How are we able to come up with centralized command systems? How do we have reliable communication systems? These floods actually exposed us to quite a bit of a challenge, given that this was happening in multiple sub-counties. You'd have different entities running in different places to responding. But even when it came to rehabilitation and recovery, you find people duplicating effort, people doing the different things, and we realize that we actually need to have a more centralized communication and control and command system, which these acts would provide for. The third element that is also missing when you look at the issue of the regulatory framework is the issue of disaster financing. First, you can never budget enough for disasters or emergencies. We know that, for example, the Constitution provides for almost, 2% of the budget, but pegged on what? We must have a robust disaster risk financing scheme that allows for not just the emergency response or the emergency fund, but even providing for upscaling of technology, equipment, personnel, to ensure that you have a robust firefighting force. Eric, if you look at more developed countries like the US and elsewhere, a firefighter is actually held in higher esteem than even other members of the disciplined forces. You go to the New York Fire Department, that is an officer that is actually held in higher regard. Here in Kenya, we are yet to really appreciate the place that such people actually belong to. And it reflects in the manner in which, or the cavalier way we treat funding of disaster management across the country.
How much is the budget, for example, this year?
Well, we have...
For Nairobi?
For Nairobi, we have the budget, the ordinary budget for what I'd call the recurrent costs. So we have the salaries. We have about 400 people. So that takes up a huge component of our budget. We have budgets to procure equipment, which we don't I must say is not quite adequate. But just ballpark figure, we are looking at about 400 to 500 million shillings.
400 to 500 million shillings.
Yes, for that is for development as well as recurrent. But also we have what you call an emergency vote, which we draw from in times such as this for recovery and rehabilitation.
How much is
those that have been affected? That actually, I'll say, is not quite fixed, but it's between 200 to 300 million shillings.
Okay.
Which
so
is
in
not
total,
adequate. You're talking about 700 million shillings.
And the county's budget annually is 42 billion.
Yes.
So in a 42 billion shilling budget,
Yes.
it's just about 600 or so
Precisely.
has been put in to disaster response and management.
Yes. And for me, that is the reason we must relook at the entire concept of disaster financing. You cannot lock it to the normal budget. Ideally, you ought to have the flexibility to say, for example, that we as a sector should not be tied to the end of we are about 2 weeks away from the end of the financial year, meaning that any commitments not done or made by that period then are surrendered back to Treasury.
Should roll
What
over.
happens? Yes. What happens when a disaster hits on the 1st of July?
Right.
Yet your hands are tied by the current framework. And we appreciate and, of course, understand why we need the Public Finance Management Act in place, just to ensure that public funds are dealt with, prudently. And but we also are quite convinced that we must have a separate framework that gives disaster management the latitude, the flexibility to be able to be agile.
Right.
So that when disasters or emergencies happen, we are not...
You're always ready.
You're always ready.
Bramwell Simiyu is the Chief Officer for Disaster Management and Coordination. That's a PS in charge of disaster management and coordination in the City County Government of Nairobi. So there's challenge number one, insufficient allocation of resources into this, which then looks into, we have this kind of 400 firefighters. We need about 3,000 firefighters. Training. They are trained by being told kuja. Sasa kuja, sasa ile ni pipe. Hii ni gari. Ile ni moto. Unashika hivi, unaangalisha moto. We don't have a proper training institution for firefighters in this county, which you said is what could respond to that question that you asked in the Senate. So and so is a firefighter. What's their training? Nursing. So you're a firefighter. So how do we recruit into this Fire and Rescue Services Directorate? And how do we train? And what's the plan going forward?
I think, Eric, let me just clarify that it's not that we do not have a good training program. Indeed, we have a very robust training program. We have very highly skilled trainers. Like I mentioned, most of the senior firefighters have been trained globally, and a lot of what they've done is what forms the curriculum that is offered at our Kangundo Road Training School. We have a very robust 6-month program. We recruited firefighters in the year 2020. These were about 300 of them. We've been taking them through training. Since I came on board, we've taken through 2 cohorts of 100 firefighters each. We did the last one ended in October. In November last year. The pass-out parade was in November. We have the next cohort actually starting training in a month's time in July, the last batch of 100. So just to clarify that, indeed, we have a very robust training program that these firefighters are taken
certified
through.
By who?
Now, the certification bit is what had not been sorted out, and it's what we are doing. We've gotten, we've actually applied for NITA, the National Industrial Training Authority certification. We've gotten DOSH, the Department of Safety and Health. That already we've gotten the certification. And the end game for us is to have Kangundo Road, what you're calling the Nairobi County Disaster Management Authority, as a premier fire and rescue training center in the region. We don't have any in actually sub-Saharan Africa.
So when you say we have a robust training program,
yes,
against what are we benchmarking?
So we're benchmarking against making sure that we have we have adequate training facilities, equipment. We'd like to be able to simulate actual training. If it's a road traffic accident, how do we extricate victims from such? We'd like to have water rescue facilities. We already have, as I speak, and I'll invite you one of these days for it. It's actually very, very robust. The only gap was that it was not certified.
Okay.
And we've taken that proactive measure to do that. But to just touch on what it takes to be a firefighter. You know, a firefighter is a paramilitary profession, just like the police, just like the Kenya Defence Forces. Now, I know that there was a bit of, I'll call it, because I can only imagine that it was a pun, that we have people with qualifications in things like theology and, in library sciences and in IT becoming firefighters. And I was asking, when you look at a policeman, what is his previous qualification? When you take a military officer, they come in as a civilian and are brought on board as a recruit.
Yep.
So firefighters are brought on board as recruits, civilians with different qualifications. In my complement, I have people with degrees in Bachelor of Commerce. We have degrees in IT. We have, practically everything across board. Now, once they come on board, they're then taken to the equivalent of Kiganjo, which is our Kangundo Road, for the 6-month paramilitary training. And they're trained on fire prevention, fire response, fire rescue. They're actually taken through the skills of becoming a firefighter.
So what's the minimum qualification? What is it that you ask for?
All level certification.
Okay.
You must be able to have at least Form 4 certification.
Okay.
That is the bare minimum. After that, of course, then you're taken through the paramilitary training. That's why they also have march past during national days. It's a discipline force. So you cannot, just like you cannot have you cannot say that to be a policeman you need a degree in criminology, or to be a military officer you can only come on be recruited when you have a degree in military science. You come in with as a raw civilian, and you're taken through that qualification, and you're given at the end of that training period, you have your certificate. So I just needed to clarify that there's nothing absolutely wrong with somebody joining the fire service with that degree in theology.
So then those allegations that were shared previously, that there are folks who are unqualified, who are working in these sectors, then from what you're saying is moot.
Absolutely. And I also wanted to clarify that the names that were presented, these are middle level to junior officers. The leadership of, like I mentioned, of the sector, we have a director. Our current director has a master's in disaster management. He's actually completing a course at the National Defence College. He has a bachelor's in disaster management. He has certificates in firefighting. His deputy, same thing. If you look at the caliber of staff that we have in terms of heading the disaster, the firefighting unit, the top leadership, all of them have they're highly qualified. Post-recruitment, they all are properly trained.
Yeah.
But that, even as we look at that course, firefighting is a highly emotional and traumatic affair. I have had opportunity to attend to incidents where we are extricating bodies from a vehicle, and I come on board not trained as a firefighter. I have gone to a scene where we are removing the body of a 6-year-old child from a sewer. My firefighters are the ones that scrape up the remains of child remains in fire incidents. So these are people who work in a very trauma-laden environment, and they also require what I'd call psychosocial support, as much as the victims of fires and disasters require as much. So there's nothing wrong with having people with training such as theology and sociology in the force, because these are the people that provide post-disaster trauma support, both internally and externally. So there's a place for anybody, even with a theology degree, not even theology, even Islamic studies, because we deal with the different demographics.
So do you have that?
Yes, we do. We do. As a matter of fact, the persons that were mentioned when I was in the Senate actually are what I call zonal disaster management officers in the sub-counties. So they interact with the public. These are the people that engage with those, with the communities.
So they're offering what, chaplaincy services?
Not chaplaincy. Really, it's just post-disaster support, trauma support, counseling, and so on and so forth. So I needed to clarify that on a national platform such as this, because I know the ridicule that we've been subjected to has been unfair and unwarranted. I know of a county police commander in the home county that I come from, who's actually an ordained priest, but he is a county police commander. Our current IG,
he's gone through training.
Yes, he's gone through the professional training. Our current IG is an engineer, for heaven's sake, but he's been taken through the training. So there's nothing wrong in the firefighting department for anybody to have any other degree prior to joining the fires, a degree or diploma, prior to joining the fire department. He or she will then be taken through the necessary professional training, and then serve as a professional firefighter.
Well, it's true. All our cadets that go to LADET have university degrees, and it doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
They have a university degree in communication, in engineering, as a doctor. And you end up and you become the head of the Kenya Army.
Oh, yes.
Not because you have a degree in killing.
Yes. Yeah. So just to give assurance to Nairobians and members of the public that Nairobi County has one of the finest staff complement.
So let me understand
highly trained and highly
Bramwell.
Yes.
You said you've just recruited 100 firefighters.
Not recruited, you're taking them to training. They were recruited a few years back.
Okay.
But, some serve as firefighters, some serve as fire prevention officers, some serve as fire investigators, others as disaster management officers. So we've been taking them. At any time, we have a complement of about 300 firefighters. Just to give you a bit of perspective, we have 6 fire stations. We have Tomboya, the oldest. We have Industrial Area, Enterprise Road, the second oldest. We then have Kangundo Road. We have Ruaraka. We have Gigiri. And we have Waithaka. Now, each of these fire stations operate through what you call a watch system, which is a shift system. Each shift, we have the green watch, we have the red watch, and we have the blue, the yellow, the green watch. Red, green, and blue watch. Now, each of these stations at any given time, if you go to Tomboya, which is now the one in town, we have the blue watch or the red watch on duty. At any given time, there are 30 at what do you call it, at Tomboya. We have 30 officers on an 8-hour shift.
Okay.
Then there's a changeover at about 5, another 30 come in. When you go to Ruaraka, which is the smallest, you have a shift of about 5. So we've distributed them equally across the
6 stations.
So at any time, there are about 270 firefighters
on duty
in
Nairobi.
Right.
Okay. Looking at what has happened over the past, what would you say then are things that have been learned and put in place to ensure that there's minimal to, almost no further destruction than the actual disaster itself when it comes to managing them? Take your pick, whether we're looking at the most recent with floods in the country, whereby, look, there was huge hue and cry in terms of, we knew the floods were coming, whether it is preparedness, and that is before, for something that we know is coming, and then dealing with it after. What are some lessons that you've learned so that, God forbid, knock on wood, something happens in the future, we can say, okay, for sure, then we are rest assured that the county disaster management system has all their ducks in a row, as it were?
Yeah, I think two perspectives. One, of course, you must look at building community resilience, because disasters will happen, not if, but when. So we must be ready to adapt. We know floods will come in all areas. And I think one of the lessons we've learned with the floods is that flooding and disaster is not just a poor man's problem. One of the hardest hit areas as we speak right now is Gigiri, Runda area. Up to now, we have places that are stuck. What does that tell us? That we can choose the route of going to bring down the buildings and the structures in Gigiri, as we've done in some of the riparian systems, or we can sit with the community and agree what needs to come down. Because these floods, when you look at the topography of Nairobi, essentially we have the highlands on the west, drawing to the flatlands of the east. We have the major rivers, the Ngong, Madare, Nairobi River, all emanating from the top, snaking through the different sub-counties, converging around Embakasi, Ruai area, and then flowing into the Athi River. Meaning that we'll always have challenges with flooding. What does it tell us? That we must engage with the community for them to understand that when you put early warning systems in place, they must obey them. One of the things we did, we issued this, the Met issued the warnings, we engaged with the community, we asked them to evacuate, many resisted. You will recall that at the county level, we had a very clear Marshall Plan, under the leadership of His Excellency the Governor and the Regional County Commissioner. And one of the things that we asked for, which then again became an object of ridicule, before El Nino, Actually, I was on
boats.
TV when I said we need rescue rafts and boats. And that became a circus. But I think with time, we were able to be vindicated that we must up our water rescue capabilities. As we speak right now, we've taken, my initial cohort of about 20 firefighters in Mombasa, divers being taken through a rigorous training program. So the first lesson that we learned is that we must build a robust community awareness as a first program where we have community teams where volunteers are put in place. Secondly...
Sorry, I'm going to hold you there.
Sure.
So what exactly does that mean? What are we saying?
What?
And can we mirror it to like, I keep forgetting what it's called. Nyumba Kumi.
Yes.
Whereby you say that for every 10 homes,
yes,
there's a champion, for example.
Precisely.
Whereby we say, okay, guys, this is coming. Have you gotten 1, 2, 3 in order? If you know that there's a problem, then move.
Yes.
And if that's what we're talking about, where you have community champions in place,
yes,
I have to then ask what's been done. Because it's one thing, Bramwell, to say that we're going to come up with a robust community agenda.
Yes.
But what has been done actually? Do the people in these low-lying areas, for example, today, are they aware? Or is it something that's being rolled out in the next 6 months? Do the people in South C, Nairobi West, South B, are they aware that, you know what, our champions are 50 in this area, and it is Eric down the road, it is Edna down the road? Do they know that this is the case?
Yes.
Are the people in Runda, Gigiri, for example, are they aware, if they're champions, who these people are?
Okay.
And unfortunately, it has to get down to the nitty-gritty because the disaster took away the nitty-gritty.
Absolutely.
So it has to be granular.
I agree.
In terms of action.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't have put it any better. And as a matter of fact, that's what we've done. So one of the lessons we learned, other than learning that we must build community resilience, the next question was the how. So what we've done is to appreciate that you need greater collaboration and cooperation among the rescue workers. So we now are we've been working very closely with the Red Cross to set up these community response teams. We have them in place. We are not talking about something we'll do in future. We have volunteer divers. We have a catalog. If I go to Kibra, to Sarangombe and Lindi, which are some of the hardest hit areas, or I go to Mukuru, the belt, or the Madare Valley, we now have, through our disaster management officers and the Red Cross officers, we have identifiable groups which are then designated as the first line of defense. These are the people that will issue the early warning. They'll coordinate the evacuation. They even coordinate the post-disaster support in terms of identifying the affected persons, what their needs are, through what you call the post-disaster needs assessment forms. So in a way, we are able to now start seeing that we are moving towards building resilience amongst the community. It's no longer a situation of serikali nisaidie and the community actually taking charge to be the ones that are shaping the strategy at that level. And just as I say that, the other bit that I also think is important is that I think is now manifestly clear that greater investments are needed.
Oh, for sure.
Right, for our sector, and I'm quite actually appreciative of what is going on within our county. His Excellency actually recognizes and appreciates the significance of this sector. I sit in his office, right? We're actually under the governorship, and one of the developments that has just come up is I'm made to understand, or I understand that in the last cabinet session, a decision was made to actually set up a disaster management fund, which then will ring-fence funding and finance for the sector, giving us, I think, a greater confidence to invest in what we require. So that is the second, I think, lesson that I think we've learned. That
on what to do.
Yeah, what to do.
Can I come in before you give? Is there a third and fourth one, perhaps? But before you do that,
yes.
Is there an understanding?
Yes.
I'm looking, you say you sit in the governor's office.
Yes.
Right? But is there an understanding between departments? Yours is disaster management.
Yes.
There's also there are other departments which operate within the county.
Yes.
Which, if you look very clearly,
yes,
they head developments.
Yes.
That, from what we are told, with the most recent disasters,
yes,
are directly involved in what could prevent the magnitude of the aftermath of some of these disasters.
Yes.
I don't know if I am making sense.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about things like approvals for buildings that are then developed upon a very weakened infrastructure, that is going to bear heavily on your department tomorrow.
Correct.
When we're talking about there being flooding and it's there are issues downstream that could have been avoided if we didn't have such heavy responsibility on an already waning infrastructure. Do you have such conversations to say, hey, Bwananani, your things are going to affect me should something happen?
So 2 things. You've actually taken now, that was my point number 3.
Oh, wonderful.
That we must mainstream disaster management in all our socioeconomic developments, policies and planning, including funding, to the extent that nothing really happens without having a conversation about disaster management. And it is indeed true that one of the hardest hit area is in our urban planning. So how do we build urban resilience with this climate change conversation, with the unplanned developments, the rising population? It's important that even as you're doing our ambitious plans to have new housing, new roads, new stadia, we must incorporate disaster management in everything that we do, as a county. And it's for that reason that disaster management, one of the things that I'm really grateful about is that we have raised the bar and the conversation about disaster management, even within the county. And one of the things we did as our Marshall Plan was to set up a multi-sector, multi-agency committee to deal with the issue of flooding and El Nino and other matters disaster related, which brings on board all the other key departments. And I chair that committee. We have environment on board, we have urban planning, we have health, we have public communication, we have works department, mobility. In a sense, we have all the other key service essential sectors, securities on board. And that committee, what we did then was to task each of those departments or sectors to come up with a sector-specific plan. So if it was health, and you're anticipating that the floods are likely to cause secondary hazards, such as waterborne diseases, what is the plan around dealing with this risk? And that's why the CHPs were onboarded. If it's environment, you'll appreciate that one of the things we did before El Nino, and we're really grateful to His Excellency, was the recruitment of the 3,000 Green Army, whose work was then to clean and clog the garbage and drainage system, garbage and drainage systems in the county. In a way, in a sense, to just complement and deal with the risk that we anticipated. Walifanya kazi. Unajua ile, and you'll recognize that before El Nino, Nairobi didn't feel the brunt. Hizi mvua za juzi, this is where we felt it because of the intensity and the magnitude of the rains. This was above normal, and it overwhelmed even our existing drainage system, not just in Kenya. I'm sure you saw this everywhere, even in other countries. So just to affirm that indeed we have that strategy in place. We have the multi-sector, multi-agency team in place, the committee which I chair. We have sector-specific plans for disaster management. DRR have their plan to engage with the community. Fire and rescue have also invested in clear benchmarks. We've set timelines. We say that for a fire within 15 kilometers, the standard is to respond within 9 minutes. Anything outside that is 15 minutes. So we've given ourselves rapid response service charter. Service charter. That is the word. Kizungu mzuri. And we are keen on each sector. Works have been given clear, environment have been told you must clear this garbage, and so on and so forth. So we have that, and this, just to say that we've also cascaded these plans to the sub-counties. So they are owned by the sub-county units, and just to appreciate that different sub-counties have different needs. So a place like Kawangware, Kibra is more fire prone. A place like Embakasi, Ruai is more flood prone. So they have a plan. And just to mention that this committee also onboards the National Government Administration. So we have the regional, the county commissioner, we have the DCCs on board, SCCs are part of these committees that meet on a weekly basis, review the disaster profile, and come up with solutions.
Bramwell, come again. Right? So we can look at this now, even going into greater detail. How many fire vehicles do we have in these stations? We have these guys who are working. So what's the response time? Let's hear the public saying yes in this one of these 3 to 4 fires that are going to be in Nairobi today. Let's hear communities telling us that we actually knew who to call. We called, and we got the response that we needed.
Correct.
Bramwell Simiyu is the Chief Officer for Disaster Management and Coordination, Nairobi City County Government.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.